Okay, here is part 2. Okay, I'm going to make this big here again. Part 2 of the PowerPoint presentation for Urban Sociology, West Virginia State University. The last slide that you saw is this one right here for the first PowerPoint, talking about social categorization. Now we move into the idea of social learning. So we're going social psychology here. Social learning perspectives on the origin of prejudice assert that prejudice is learned from others around us. And again, just to reinforce the note-taking here, you don't have a shelf for these, so you want to take good notes on these. Okay, stop and start this at your leisure. Sources of prejudice. Prejudice, again, we've talked about, comes from different places. So when people learn to be prejudiced, I am of the opinion, I don't give many of my personal opinions, I don't think that human beings are born being prejudiced. I don't think we're born understanding and knowing that we are superior to other people based on whatever characteristics we come up with. I think we are taught. We are taught by the media. We're taught by our parents, the internet, our friends. We can even go so far as to say other social institutions such as religion and public education also teach us to be prejudiced, not on purpose necessarily, but it happens. And you can think of the images that we get from the media, maybe some things your parents have said to you. Certainly the internet is full of these prejudicial ideas and images that could infiltrate, especially the minds of the youth, and plant seeds that grow, that just feed into our prejudices as adults. Social learning perspective on the origins of prejudice asserts, again, that prejudice is learned from others around us. So I want to reinforce that point. Social learning suggests that prejudice can be positively reinforced. And I've seen this a lot, whether we're talking about, someone who lives in a city who is prejudiced against those who maybe live in the suburbs or in rural areas, whatever the case may be, especially young children, if their parents are positively reinforcing this behavior, or not behavior, I'm sorry, but these attitudes, then it's just going to strengthen those attitudes, which could ultimately lead to discrimination, which are the behaviors. If something is positively reinforced, that means that something is given to increase the chances that that prejudice will sustain. Example, I think I used this in class. I saw, this is not an urban example, but it's an example. 2-year-old child is espouting hatred on the Jerry Springer show about 20 years ago for African Americans, for Jews, for women. Horrible, vile hatred, just the language coming from this child. And I remember thinking what I said a few minutes ago. There's no child that's born knowing and understanding what it means to be this prejudiced. But he's being positively reinforced. His father and his grandfather are standing behind him, positively reinforcing this stuff. Every time he says something horrible about a specific group of people, he gets praise from his grandfather. He gets praise from his father. And what 2-year-old boy doesn't want praise from his father or his grandfather? So he continues to say these horrible things because he knows he's going to be praised for it. Now, prejudice stems partly from basic aspects of social cognition and stereotypes. And we're going to talk about what social cognition and stereotypes are and kind of apply them to our discussion of the city here. Social cognition. This is the process through which we notice, store, remember, and later use social information. We notice things. We can't notice everything that happens around us, but we notice a lot. We store what we think is important. We remember it, and then we use it later for our benefit. And that's sort of how this works. Now, attribution. This is another important concept to have in your notes. This is the process where we seek to determine the causes behind other people's behaviors. If you've ever traveled to a city and you see people, the way they're dressed, the way they're acting, why would people do this? At Mardi Gras, why do people wear beads, and why are they half naked, and why are they peeing in the streets? Well, because it's Mardi Gras, because it's a socially sanctioned event. If you saw this happening in Charleston, you might think, well, this is strange because this isn't something that really normally happens in Charleston, West Virginia. So why is it that people are doing these things? We try to figure out why people do what they do. Now, the correspondence bias, this is another important term. This is our tendency to attribute behavior to inside or internal causes to a greater extent than is actually justified. So again, we're making internal attributions here. We assume that people do things because they choose to. Why is it that someone in a city doesn't say hi to me or is not very friendly? It's because he is rude. It's because he is choosing to be unobservant. Well, those are internal attributions. Those are examples of the correspondence bias. But we could flip the argument and say, well, it's not really because the person's trying to be rude or choosing to be. Maybe when you live in a city, you can't attend to everything. You're in a hurry. It becomes a mentality in a way of survival from getting from A to B to C to D very quickly, and it just becomes that sort of way of surviving in a city for a person. So it's not something the person chooses to be. More or less, it's the way the person has to be in a city. You have to be focused and moving and quick to get things done, perhaps. Now, stereotypes. We stereotype constantly. We stereotype people in cities, inner cities, especially minorities, African Americans in inner cities get stereotyped horribly. We often see statistics where we understand that African American homicide rates in inner cities are 8 to 12 times higher than homicide rates for African Americans anywhere else. We see that, and some statistics show that African American homicide rates in inner cities are 16 to 20 times higher than homicide rates for all other races and ethnicities combined. And then we start to stereotype. We start to say, well, black people are just dangerous. They're just thugs. They're drug dealers. They're this, and that. And that's dangerous. We get into this idea of stereotyping, which, generally speaking, stereotypes are negatively connotated. They're cognitive frameworks suggesting that all members of social groups share certain characteristics. And, of course, you have the classic stereotype of the cop eating donuts. Donut mess with a cop, haha, right? Well, obviously that's a stereotype. Does every cop eat donuts? Well, maybe. Who doesn't eat a donut every now and then? I just had one today. It was fantastic. So again, this idea that, well, the cops must be all in the donut shops. They must be eating donuts. Well, very rarely have I ever seen a cop eating a donut in a donut shop. So I don't know. But we stereotype groups of people, especially in cities. And again, if you're not from the city, if you're like me, you're not. You're from a more rural area. We get stereotyped by people in cities, so it goes both ways. So we could look at these images. The guy on the left, if I ask you to predict things that he did, his activities that he engaged in, his interests, maybe his job, his education, how he treats women, this guy right here, I'll bet I would hear, and when I ask this in class, I hear the same things, and I'll bet I would hear the same things in this class. Well, he's not educated, and he likes country music, and there's probably a rebel flag in his truck somewhere, and he's probably beats up on his girlfriends, and you get the same kind of stuff. He likes NASCAR, he likes country music. Well, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, not necessarily. The guy here on the right, the stereotype of the nerd. I ask questions like, well, how is this guy with women? How smart is he? What are his social skills like? I hear the same kind of answers. Well, he's probably not good with girls. Probably has no social skills. He's probably like the nerd doing all the homework for all the football players in high school. You get the same kind of stuff, and that may or may not be true. The stereotype of the cheerleader, if you will, blonde, ditzy, loose with morals. And obviously, this is not true, not even close to being true of most cheerleaders that I know in teaching in high schools all over the county. And I have a lot of cheerleaders in my class, and most of them are quite intelligent. And of course, you have the image of the African American here on the right. Same question: what kind of music does he like? How many kids does he have? What's his lifestyle? Well, he's in prison probably, and he probably has 18 kids, and he's got a grill. You just can't see it because his mouth's closed. And he likes rap music, and you get the same kind of stuff. We could stereotype groups of people from here on. We could do football players or jocks. We could do, certain subcultures, musical groups. How might we stereotype people in upper classes in cities? Do we assume that they're just snobby, rich people who are out of touch with the rest of us? Maybe. Maybe some of them are. Maybe some of them are not. So, how might we stereotype poor people in cities? Are they uneducated again? Are they lazy? Are they trapped? Maybe they're trapped and they can't get out of there. We don't really think about that as much. So we have these images of poor people in cities as well. I'm going to look at something here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this the end of the second part for the PowerPoint video lecture on social behavior. Thank you.